Now in Ottawa, there is a growing push for the federal government to do more to address that painful history of residential schools. The NDP is calling for an emergency debate. Let's bring in the CBC's Janice McGregor, who's on this story for us today. So Janice, these calls for action echo really what came out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Can you take us through some of those findings, just to remind us of them?
That's right, because the report with its 94 calls to action came out in 2015, and with the passage of time, I think maybe some people have forgotten the nature of the testimony and the facts it contained, specifically about missing children and burial grounds. There was a working group as part of the TRC process that specifically looked at these issues, and if anyone watched that testimony as it unfolded over the years, the stories are hard to forget. In his letter to the House of Commons Speaker, Anthony Rota, NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh, in calling for a debate in Parliament, an emergency debate in Parliament on this issue, he says, as Parliament resumes from its weekend break, it's imperative that an opportunity be provided to parliamentarians to discuss this cultural genocide. Important questions deserve to be asked about this in other schools, and immediate concrete measures need to be taken as a way to seek justice and uphold the rule of law. When family members, when former students, when community members gave their testimony, told their stories to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they spoke about missing sons and daughters who did not come home, people who were not properly accounted for in the record keeping. The TRC tried, but wasn't always successful in getting the records it believed may have existed, and not only from the churches and the government authorities that ran the schools, but also from local coroners' offices, provincial government authorities who kept some of these death registries. Nevertheless, though, in its 2015 report, it concluded that some 4,200 children died at these schools, some of illness, disease, some by accident, some based on what we've been told happened behind those walls, potentially as a result of abuse. And Justin Trudeau's Liberal government has promised to act on all 94 of the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation report. Important to note that 6 of them have to do with this specific issue of missing children and their burial grounds.
And Janice, what's been done so far? We know there was money in the budget that was supposed to help.
That's right. The TRC called for the creation of a national death registry, as well as some kind of an online registry to take proper account of residential school cemeteries, including perhaps this one in Kamloops, because we know that they weren't always marked. They weren't always even acknowledged. The 2019 federal budget set aside some $33 million for this work. And the government's website says that discussions had begun with the affected communities about proceeding in this direction. But then, of course, we know then came the pandemic. It's unclear exactly what's been done since those funds were announced. And I think that's one of the questions we would have for the government today. What exactly has been done with that money? Has any of it been spent to what effect? We know that some of these school buildings still stand. Others don't. Some of the land that they stood on has changed hands, but the TRC calls for action. We're very specific about the need for the Indigenous community to lead this process, because when it comes to doing this kind of forensic investigative work, the sort of thing that might be required to properly identify these remains, the TRC said Indigenous protocols must be respected before this work begins.
Janice, thanks so much. I always appreciate it.